What if I told you that one of the deadliest natural disasters in modern history wasn't a hurricane or an earthquake, but a fog? A fog so thick and deadly that it brought one of the world's busiest cities to a complete standstill, and in its wake, claimed the lives of thousands. This is the story of the Great Smog of London in December 1952, a disaster shrouded in mystery, science, and tragedy. London was no stranger to fog. Its damp, cold climate and frequent coal-burning fires had long earned it the nickname, the Big Smoke. But what descended upon the city on December 5, 1952, was no ordinary fog. It was a dense, yellowish cloud that choked the city for 5 long days. It seeped into homes, hospitals, and public spaces, sparing no one in its path. But what caused this catastrophic event, and why was it so deadly? To understand the Great Smog, we need to delve into the context of post-war Britain. The 1950s were a time of economic recovery. Coal was the lifeblood of British industry and the primary source of fuel for heating homes. On the surface, this seemed like an ordinary winter, cold, with people stoking their fires to keep warm. But a unique set of circumstances created a perfect storm. The week leading up to the disaster was unusually cold, and a high-pressure weather system settled over London, trapping cold air at ground level. To stay warm, Londoners burned an unprecedented amount of coal, much of it low quality with high sulfur content. This produced enormous amounts of smoke and sulfur dioxide. Meanwhile, the lack of wind meant that these pollutants had nowhere to go, and then the fog rolled in. The result was a toxic cocktail of smoke and fog, a smog so dense that visibility dropped to near zero in some areas. Buses stopped running, flights were grounded, and pedestrians had to feel their way along buildings to avoid walking into the street. Life in the city ground to a halt. But the real horror wasn't just the inconvenience, it was the deadly effects on human health. Hospitals quickly became overwhelmed with patients suffering from respiratory issues. Reports describe people coughing up black mucus, a grim testament to what they were breathing in. Those with pre-existing conditions, the elderly and children were the most vulnerable. By the time the smog lifted on December 9th, an estimated 4,000 people had died. In the weeks and months that followed, researchers uncovered an even more horrifying truth. The true death toll was not 4,000 but closer to 12,000, with tens of thousands more suffering long-term health effects. It was a staggering revelation that demanded answers. Why had this happened, and could it have been prevented? At the time, there was no understanding of how deadly air pollution could be. Londoners had lived with smoky air for centuries and saw it as little more than an annoyance. But the Great Smog changed everything. It was a wake-up call that forced scientists and policymakers to confront the link between air pollution and public health. In the aftermath, the British government passed the Clean Air Act of 1956, which restricted the use of coal in urban areas and promoted cleaner forms of energy. It was a pivotal moment in environmental policy, not just for Britain, but for the world. Yet, despite these changes, the Great Smog of 1952 remains a chilling reminder of what can happen when industrial progress comes at the expense of environmental health. But here's where the mystery deepens. Some experts believe the Great Smog wasn't just a natural disaster, but a man-made one. Could the government's reliance on cheap, high-sulfur coal have played a role? Were warnings about air pollution ignored in the years leading up to the disaster? And most intriguingly, could something like this happen again? As cities around the world grapple with pollution and climate change, the story of the Great Smog is more relevant than ever. It's a haunting tale of how human activity can disrupt the natural world with devastating consequences. And it's a reminder that sometimes the most lethal threats are the ones we can't even see. So the next time you step outside and take a deep breath, remember the lessons of London's deadly fog. Because history, as they say, has a way of repeating itself. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more mysteries from the past, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Epic Time Journeys. Until next time, stay curious.